What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com.
Here are my DFS picks for NFL Week 6. Final look.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button
And hit that bell icon
so you don't miss our new videos.
In this video, I'm going to go over each position and break down a couple of my favorite players for this NFL DFS main slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made. Oh, and good news, guys. Make sure to stay tuned to the very end of this video because we removed the box that was popping up and blocking the lineup. So now you can see a full lineup using these picks that we made in this video if you stay to the very end. Okay, guys, NFL Week 6. Let's take a look at the quarterback position. So at the top, the stud pick of the week is Patrick Mahomes from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Washington football team, who have the second worst defense overall, and they give up the second most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Patrick Mahomes has averaged 28.8 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 4.6 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 13% owned, projected at 28.1 fantasy points here in Week 6. He's 8,300 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 54.5 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 7. So you got a super high scoring game, a fantastic matchup, and this game's only going to be within a touchdown, so there should be plenty of pressure on Patrick Mahomes to continue scoring the football. He's got monster upside this week. He had 8 rush attempts last week. So I like Patrick Mahomes here versus the Washington football team. Now another quarterback that I like is Justin Herbert from the LA Chargers playing the Baltimore Ravens, who have a middle of the pack defense overall, and they're middle of the pack defending opposing quarterbacks. Justin Herbert has averaged 27.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 3.8 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 3% owned, projected at 22.2 fantasy points here in Week 6. He's 7,300 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 51.5 points scored in this game, and they have the Chargers trailing by 2.5. So you got a high-scoring game, a close, competitive game, and a suspect defense. Justin Herbert's got a monster ceiling. He put up 46 fantasy points last game, and I like that low ownership, coming in at only 3% ownership. I think that's way too low, so I like Justin Herbert here versus the Baltimore Ravens. Now another quarterback I like is Matthew Stafford from the LA Rams playing the New York Giants, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Matthew Stafford has averaged 23.8 fantasy points per game on the season, and he's getting an average of 3.2 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 6% owned, projected at 23.9 fantasy points here in Week 6. He's 6,700 DraftKings salary, 1,200 more on FanDuel, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Rams favored by 8.5. So Stafford's got a great matchup this week. He's been playing well. He's got awesome wide receivers, tons of upside, and he's got a lot of value on this slate for his projected points and his salary. So I like Matthew Stafford here versus the New York Giants. Now, if you're looking to save some salary at the quarterback position and roll the dice here, take a look at Taylor Heinicke from the Washington football team playing the Kansas City Chiefs, who have the absolute worst defense overall. They give up the most fantasy points to opposing quarterbacks. Taylor Heinicke has averaged 19.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5 rush attempts per game. He's going to be about 10% owned here, projected at 19.7 fantasy points here in week 6. He's only 5,800 DraftKings salary, 1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 54.5 points scored in this game, with the Washington football team trailing by 7. So you got that super high scoring game in a passing game script and a fantastic matchup with a low salary. So I like Taylor Heineke here versus the Kansas City Chiefs. Okay, everyone, it's time to announce the winner of our $25 weekly PayPal giveaway. And the winner is Caddy's Corner. Caddy's Corner, congratulations. You are the winner of this week's $25 PayPal giveaway. Please reply to our comment to collect your prize. Okay guys, it's time to announce the winner of our $25 weekly PayPal giveaway. And the winner is Matt Cicilline. Matt Cicilline, congratulations. You are the winner of this week's $25 PayPal giveaway. Please reply to our comment to collect your prize.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching.
If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal,
all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won.
And we'll send you $25 PayPal.
So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the running back position. So the stud running back on the slate, I like Austin Eckler. He's in a good spot here versus the Ravens. But I also like Jonathan Taylor from the Indianapolis Colts playing the Houston Texans, who have the 8th worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing running backs. Jonathan Taylor has averaged 18.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 14.6 rush attempts per game and 3.2 pass targets per game. He's going to be about 14% owned, projected at 17.6 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 6,600 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game, with the Colts favored by 10. So this is a good matchup, and this could turn into a running game script if the Colts take the lead over the Houston Texans. Jonathan Taylor could get a ton of work. He scored 35 and 23 fantasy points in the last 2 games, getting close to 20 touches, about 19 touches in each of those games. So I like Jonathan Taylor here versus the Houston Texans. Okay, another running back that I like is Darrell Henderson Jr. from the LA Rams playing the New York Giants, who have the 5th worst defense overall, and they give up the 9th most fantasy points to opposing running backs. Darrell Henderson Jr. has averaged 16.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 15 rush attempts per game and 3.3 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 78% of the snaps. He's going to be about 17% owned, projected at 15.6 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 6,000 DraftKings salary, 1,300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Rams favored by 8.5. So this is a great matchup. Darrell Henderson Jr., he's played well his last 2 games, scoring 17 fantasy points the last 2 weeks. So I like Darrell Henderson Jr. here versus the New York Giants. Okay, now if you're looking for a low salary running back, a guy that should have plenty of opportunity this week, take a look at Khalil Herbert from the Chicago Bears playing the Green Bay Packers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing running backs. Khalil Herbert, he got 18 rush attempts last game, only scored 8 fantasy points, but he's going to be the number one running back due to injury in the Chicago Bears. So he's going to be heading up the backfield, and he's going to be about 14% owned, projected at 9.6 fantasy points here in week 6. But he's only 4,600 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Bears trailing by 6. So it's not every week that you're going to get a starting running back, a guy that might carry the ball 18 to 20 times for only 4,600 DraftKings salary. So he's got plenty of opportunity. So I like Khalil Herbert here versus the Green Bay Packers. Okay, let's take a look at the wide receiver position. The wide receiver stud, I like Davante Adams from the Green Bay Packers playing the Chicago Bears, who have a good defense overall, but they give up the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Davante Adams has averaged 24.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 12.2 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 85% of the snaps. He's going to be about 19% owned, projected at 22.5 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 9,000 DraftKings salary and 500 less on FanDuel. So I like that FanDuel price. Now Vegas thinks there's going to be 44.5 points scored in this game, with the Packers favored by 6. So he's got a good wide receiver matchup this week, and this guy's just getting monster volume, 16, 11, and 18 pass targets in the last 3 weeks, putting up 41, 12, and 34 fantasy points. So he's been a slate breaker 2 out of the past 3 weeks. So I like Davante Adams here versus the Chicago Bears. Another wide receiver that I like, so I like Terry McLaurin, but he didn't practice on Friday, so that's a bit concerning. He was my favorite wide receiver on the slate, but I am a little bit concerned that he didn't practice on Friday, so we're going to have to keep our eye on that one. If he is good to go, I think Terry McLaurin is going to be in a good spot. But moving on from Terry McLaurin, I like Keenan Allen from the LA Chargers playing the Baltimore Ravens, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. Now, they've been pretty good versus opposing wide receivers, but Keenan Allen has averaged 16.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 10.6 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 87% of the snaps. He's going to be about 11% owned, projected at 16.3 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 6,400 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 51.5 points scored in this game, with the Chargers trailing by 2.5. So this guy's getting monster targets, double-digit targets just about every single game, scoring double-digit fantasy points. So I think he makes a nice value play. He's a mid-range play who's got pretty big upside. So I like Keenan Allen here versus the Baltimore Ravens.
Real quick, guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all the tools for NFL. MLB is still going. NBA is right around the corner. This is a great time to get in and try everything for 1 month. The tools are all about saving research time. You can see the last 3 games, the fantasy points per game, the targets they got per game, so you can see how involved they are in the offense, the rushes they got per game. Seeing all this stuff on one screen helps you save time and make better picks. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups. Another wide receiver I like is Robert Woods from the LA Rams playing the New York Giants, who have the 5th worst defense overall and they're middle of the pack defending opposing wide receivers. Robert Woods has averaged 15.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 92% of the snaps. He's going to be about 10% owned, projected at 15.1 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 6,100 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 49 points scored in this game, with the Rams favored by 8.5. So he's got a decent matchup this week, and he got 14 pass targets last week, scored 30 fantasy points. So I like Robert Woods here versus the New York Giants. Now I also like Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans playing the Indianapolis Colts, who have the 6th worst defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Brandon Cooks has averaged 16.5 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.8 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 87% of the snaps. He's going to be about 7% owned, projected at 14.6 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 5,800 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game, with the Texans trailing by 10. So you got a fantastic matchup and a passing game script. I wouldn't be surprised if Brandon Cooks gets double-digit targets, 10 targets or more in this game. He only had 5 targets last game, but I think that they're going to have to pass the ball an awfully lot this game. So I like Brandon Cooks here versus the Indianapolis Colts. Now I also like Jacoby Myers from the New England Patriots playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 5th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. Jacoby Myers has averaged 12.6 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 9.2 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 94% of the snaps. He's going to be about 9% owned, projected at 13.4 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 5,500 DraftKings salary, 300 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the Patriots trailing by 3.5. So high scoring game, nice wide receiver matchup here. In a game, I think the Patriots are going to fall behind by a touchdown or even 10 points in this game. So I think they're going to have to pass the ball quite a bit. And Jacoby Myers is getting close to 10 targets a game. Only had 5 targets last game, but he had 12 and 14 targets the games before that. So I like Jacoby Myers here versus the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, moving on to the tight end position. The stud at the tight end position is Travis Kelce from the Kansas City Chiefs playing the Washington football team, who have the 2nd worst defense overall. They're middle of the pack defending opposing tight ends. Travis Kelce has averaged 19.4 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 8.4 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 87% of the snaps, going to be about 16% owned, projected at 19.4 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 7,000 DraftKings salary, 1,500 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 54.5 points scored in this game, with the Kansas City Chiefs favored by 7. So we know this is a super high scoring game, much closer game than I would have thought, within a touchdown and a good matchup. So I like Travis Kelce here versus the Washington football team. Okay, the other tight end that I like is Mark Andrews from the Baltimore Ravens playing the LA Chargers, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall, and they give up the 2nd most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Mark Andrews has averaged 18.2 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 7.6 pass targets per game. He's been on the field for 75% of the snaps. He's going to be about 12% owned,
projected at 14.7 fantasy points here in week 6. And he's only 5,200 DraftKings salary, 1,100 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 51.5 points scored in this game, with the Ravens favored by 2.5. So great tight end matchup here. He's been the favorite of Lamar Jackson, a favorite target of Lamar Jackson. He got 13 targets last game, scored 45 fantasy points. So this guy makes a lot of sense with monster upside for only 5,200 DraftKings salary. So I like Mark Andrews here versus the LA Chargers. Okay, another tight end that I like is Noah Fant from the Denver Broncos playing the Las Vegas Raiders, who have a good defense overall, but they give up the 10th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Noah Fant has averaged 10.1 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 6.2 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 86% of the snaps. He's going to be about 6% owned, projected at 11.8 fantasy points here in week 6. He's 4,800 DraftKings salary, 1,000 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 43.5 points scored in this game, with the Broncos favored by 4. So he's got a good tight end matchup, and he did only score 5 fantasy points last week off of 4 pass targets, but he scored 17 fantasy points off of 10 pass targets the game before that. So this could be a good game to get Noah Fant at lower ownership. But the problem with this play is that he's 4,800 DraftKings salary, and for only 400 more, you can get Mark Andrews, who just appears to be in a better spot this week. But I don't want to ignore Noah Fant. I think he can do real well in this one. So I like Noah Fant here versus the Las Vegas Raiders. And the other tight end that I like is Hunter Henry from the New England Patriots playing the Dallas Cowboys, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They give up the 7th most fantasy points to opposing tight ends. Hunter Henry has averaged 10.7 fantasy points per game on the season, getting an average of 5.2 pass targets per game. He's on the field for 71% of the snaps, only going to be about 3% owned, projected at 9.7 fantasy points here in week 6. And he's only 3,900 DraftKings salary, 1,700 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 50.5 points scored in this game, with the New England Patriots trailing by 3.5. So I think the Patriots are going to fall behind by at least a touchdown in this one. It's going to put the pressure on the Patriots to throw the ball. So I'm expecting 8 to 10 pass targets for Hunter Henry. Now, 10 pass targets may be a bit much, but at least 8 pass targets in this one. And he's got a great tight end matchup this week, and his salary's low and his ownership is low. He was a sleeper pick of ours last week. He scored 20 fantasy points off of 8 pass targets, and his salary hasn't gone up too much. So I like Hunter Henry here versus the Dallas Cowboys.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video, or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.